Hello, everyone. It's your boy, the villain, Marty Skull. And today, I'm fired up. I'm fired up, baby. Because today, we're asking the question, who killed WCW? Actually, we're not really asking the question. A TV show kind of asked the question in a 4-part series. We watched the first part, or episode 1, and today we are reviewing Who Killed WCW. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know what I'm talking about. Produced by Dark Side of the Ring and $7 Productions, which, as we know, is The Rock's and his ex-wife, Danny Garcia's company. Called $7, by the way, because when The Rock was young, he only had $7 in his pocket.
Likes to remind people of that, yes.
Likes to remind people that he only had $7 in his pocket. The thing is, he had $7 in his pocket, but he had like tens of thousands in the bank.
3 million in the bank.
But yes, it's there's been a lot of promotion. It's been a lot of build for this Who Killed WCW. So Sam and I, we thought, why don't we check out this show and see what it's all about and see if there's anything in this show that we haven't seen or heard before. Because let's be honest, the whole talk of WCW, at least from like the WWE side, has all kind of been done to death. This is a classic wrestling review podcast. We like to kind of go a lot deeper. So we're talking about a lot more obscure stuff in WCW rather than just like, oh, and then the streak ended and oh, this is how the NWO formed. It's like, okay, we've heard about that hundreds of times by now. So we wanted to see if this episode gave us anything more. Before I go any further and we get into this review, I am the villain, Marty Skull. I've told you that already. And joining me, as always, is the producer of the show, Mr. Samuel Scott. Sam, had you heard about this show until I brought it up to you? Or because I feel like they've done a lot of promotion for this.
No, I was going to say I watch less TV than you do, but maybe actually you watch less TV. Yeah, you don't watch any. No, this is the first time I heard of it was when you suggested it. And it was the perfect suggestion because we did Bash at the Beach 94 last week. And so I'm kind of in a WCW mood, but I need a bit of a buffer after watching Bash at the Beach 94 before we like tackle another proper WCW one. So this is just like the perfect middle ground. So I'm happy about that.
Are you, you ever watch Vice at all? Because I've seen some other documentaries on Vice other than the wrestling ones, and I seem to remember really like enjoying them.
So I've seen, I've never watched the Dark Side of the Rings. I think you've seen them all. I haven't seen.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of them.
Yeah, but I have seen other Vice documentaries, and I would say, well, you compare this to Dark Side of the Ring, but I feel like this falls in line quite a lot with like the rest of their documentaries, like style and presentation and aesthetic.
It's a little different, but yeah, I guess kind of you're right. I guess similar. Dark Side of the Ring, they make it a lot more like dramatic and I
feel like that's where we're going to get though. Not that dramatic, but I feel like they're setting the seeds in this episode, which we'll talk about to start the drama next week.
You're probably right. I don't know why. Maybe I must have like signed up to like a trial of Vice, so I end up watching, probably to watch Dark Side of the Ring, and then ended up watching something else. I'm pretty sure I saw a documentary on Vice about the band Eiffel. Is it Eiffel 65 or Eiffel 55? Basically, the guys 65. That sang the
Blue.
Blue. I am blue. Dabba dee dabba die. There was a documentary on that song and that band, and it was actually really interesting, really fascinating. It definitely, I can't remember what the show is called, but it's on Vice. It's about that. I would recommend watching that. That was actually pretty fun.
It's funny how they how they choose to make a documentary about. I'm not even just talking about Vice. I'm just talking about in general. Like, I never would have thought someone would bother to make, because I'm assuming Eiffel 65 are one-hit wonders. I only know Blue. Weird to think that there's a Vice documentary about them. Maybe I should listen to.
Well, that's why there's a documentary about it.
Exactly.
It's a one-hit wonder. Such a big. Yeah, it's actually a really interesting origin story. Like, I didn't realize that song had been out for quite a long time until it kind of blew up,
Oh, really?
Then it became number one in like the whole entire world. So, but yes, we quite enjoy Vice. The Dark Side of the Rings, I enjoy to a degree. It's funny. It's like the things I like watching most in wrestling are these sort of documentaries about the past. You know, like WWE do the biographies or the Legend series and the Rival series. I'm kind of more into that than I am watching weekly wrestling on TV. So, but we know that I love the classic wrestling. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's just get straight into it. Who Killed WCW? So the show kind of goes in chronological order, I would say. It basically goes from when it essentially follows Eric Bischoff, really, right?
I'd say, yeah.
It kind of follows Eric Bischoff from basically when he joined, and it goes all the way up until Starrcade 97. So it's covering a lot of ground for the first episode. I'm guessing the next 3 episodes are going to be all the disasters after 1997, and obviously inevitably going out of business. But the show starts and it basically tells a tale of WCW being a far second to the WWF. In the 80s, the WWF really, became big and mainstream, and WCW was a very far number 2. And then obviously it was Jim Crockett Promotions originally. Ted Turner bought Jim Crockett Promotions, turned it into WCW because he always had a place in his heart for pro wrestling. I guess wrestling helps him in the early days with, I think wrestling was like some of the first stuff ever on TV. And wrestling's always been popular because it's like easy to film and get on TV, if that makes sense. So Ted Turner was a wrestling fan, had a big place in his heart. And he obviously saw Jim Crockett Promotions, probably saw it was struggling, wanted to buy it. They have WCW. Then they show Eric Bischoff. He was a salesman. He was selling a toy called Ninja Stars, which he then tried to sell to Vern Gagne to advertise on the AWA. Vern ended up hiring Bischoff as a interviewer, whatever it might be. And then from there, I guess Larry Sabisco got him a job with WCW. So we see that. We also see from the early days, early 90s, that both Scott Hall and Kevin Nash worked for WCW, both kind of unsuccessfly. Scott Hall was the Diamond Stud, but never really got anywhere in the company. And I always find this quite bizarre so WCW had Kevin Nash in the early 90s. And of course, he was very, very green. But how did he not know what to do with him? Why? Because they talk about this. They don't really talk about Vinny Vegas, but they talk about the Oz gimmick, which was clearly just awful. And it's like, why they had someone that's so big and cool, why were they giving them these awful goofy gimmicks? I don't understand.
I've never seen Oz before. That made me burst out laughing because he's a handsome man and they put an old man mask over him. Talk about getting it wrong. I
don't understand. Clearly because the WWF had made these big and bright sort of cartoon characters in the 80s, and WCW felt like they were trying to catch up. But as we kind of discussed last week, how he said WCW just seemed very kind of dated and kind of second rate, and the budget's not quite there. Whereas when WWE were doing these larger than life characters, you can kind of believe it. Whereas with WCW, just came across as kind of second rate. I guess it'd be the difference between going to Disney and then going to the local fair or something. Do you know what I mean? That's the comparison.
I get it. Yeah.
I just don't understand how they had Kevin Nash and they thought we're making Vinny Vegas or we're making Oz. It's just so.
I know.
Right?
Wasted potential. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Well, it tells a story about them two leaving, going to the WWF, becoming big stars as Diesel and Kevin Nash. Then
Diesel and Razor Ramon.
Sorry, Diesel and Razor Ramon. That makes sense. Then it goes into Eric Bischoff becoming what's the correct term? Executive producer of WCW.
Yes.
And he kind of comes as out of nowhere, kind of threw his name in the hat and somehow ended up as the executive producer. Yep. And before this, WCW had so many problems with Jim Herd being the boss. And it was just completely, that's why we had all these disastrous gimmicks. Somehow it ends up with Eric Bischoff. And to be fair to him, he starts making moves from the get-go because now they tell the story about how Hogan had left the WWF. He was working on, Thunder in Paradise?
Yeah, which we talked about last week.
Which happened to be filming in Orlando. And Bischoff approached Hogan and managed to sign Hulk Hogan, which was, a big deal for WCW. Yep. And the way I thought it was, because we talked about last week how I was saying, damn, people don't really give Hogan credit. Like, I think someone says that in this. I think it was Kevin Sullivan, my favorite. Sullivan said, like, I think he said, without Hogan, we wouldn't be here just in terms of wrestling as a whole.
Right.
But I think you could also say that for WCW. If they didn't get Hogan in 94 or ever get, like, there's a good chance WCW doesn't have the big run that it went on to have. So that's what makes me laugh when people think, oh, they gave him creative control, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't think you realized, like, after having Hogan, people forget that WWF and WCW were competitive with these shows for quite a while. Well, I guess we'll get there because so Hogan's there.
Yep.
Then Ted Turner asked Bischoff, how do we become competitive with Vince McMahon? And Bischoff throws out there, we need a primetime show. Vince is on Mondays primetime. We're on Saturdays, like in the afternoon and whatnot. Surprisingly to Bischoff, Ted Turner gives him a show 2 hours a week. We all know the story against Monday Night Raw. And not only that, but it's going to be live. So Bischoff said that, like, oh, the way we could be an advantage. He wanted the show, or he wanted WCW to be completely different to the WWF. And it's like, okay, they're pre-recorded. Let's be live. So, and to be fair, like Bischoff doesn't really get, well, maybe he does get the credit, but he talks about how he wants the whole look and the feel of the show to be completely different to the WWE. And I think like that to me is just so important. And I feel like he did a really good job of that. And I wish, I'm not taking any shots at any other wrestling companies out there, but I think wrestling companies now, they think like, oh, how can we do like the best matches or do this? It's like, okay, why don't you look at what the number one company is, WWE, and try and just make it completely different? Because we ain't going to beat WWE doing what they do, are we? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's why I really enjoyed like Lucha Underground. It wasn't really my style of wrestling, but it's like, okay, they're trying a new approach at pro wrestling. Or even the original NWA, like, Billy Corgan's NWA, like the first season of Power. Like, I didn't think the wrestling was amazing on it, but the look and the feel of the show was just completely different. And I feel like now, whether it's WWE, AEW, TNA, like, again, they're all different, but they're all kind of still the same concept, if that makes sense. Obviously, there's difference in budgets and stuff, but it's still kind of the look and the feel, realistically, is the format. It's kind of the same,
right? Yeah, totally, yeah. If they're in any way similar to what WWF are doing or WWE are doing, then you will not be able to just like not draw a comparison to, hey, this is just like second rate WWF. But if it's wildly different,
like ECW,
like ECW, perfect example. Oh, well done, Martin.
Well, I just think if you're going to be like WWE, they have 50 years or whatever it is experience advantage over everyone and millions and millions of dollars, and just the fact that the experience, not just in the fact that like they know what they're doing, but just like WWE has reached so many parts of the world. You know what I mean? It's had all that time, everyone knows what it is. Whereas ECW, they realized no chance in hell could they compete with WWE on a budget level. So their approach was, how can we be, Paul Heyman was very good at kind of hiding people's weaknesses and highlighting their strengths. And he did that for the actual whole promotion. And it felt completely different and everything else. So that look and that feel of the show, I think, is so important. Again, I don't know if Bischoff gets enough credit for that. People give him credit for like the NWO or whatever else, or bringing Nitro as a whole. But like, yeah, I will say this though, his idea to make the look and the feel of the show different is to run Nitro in the Mall of America, which I thought was pretty funny how Bischoff was actually kind of putting that over on this show. We've discussed it before because we have reviewed the first ever Nitro, if you go back in the archives. And I believe we both agreed.
That was our pilot that we never released.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
The Chillins have never heard that.
Really? No, we have.
Mm-mm.
I think you're wrong.
All right.
You might be right. You're probably right. Okay.
You changed your tune quickly.
No, you're probably right. Okay, so we have reviewed the first ever Nitro, but it's never been released. So maybe we'll do that after these shows. But so I guess this is spoilers for that episode. Myself and Sam, we both kind of agreed. I think that the more having a show or a TV taping at the Mall of America, we felt like it looked kind of Bush League, huh?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And Eric, yeah, like you said, Eric in the episode was trying to swing it like it was just a novel and grand thing. And it looked like a amphitheater, but for like the middle, or whatever he said, like a combat arena, but full of the middle class or something like that. And it's like,
yes,
no, it looks like trash, which is great, but like, which is funny, but.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
he
anyway,
needs to go back and rewatch it, I think.
Yeah, I think he does. Because Bischoff's normally, I feel like he's spot on with a lot of things.
A lot of his points
he is actually one of the wrestling personalities. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of things he says, but a lot of stuff I do. And I don't know why, but I just really enjoy listening to Eric Bischoff talk. I think he is just super engaging. And I've said it a bunch of times on the show. I feel like as a performer, he's one of the most underrated performers of all time in wrestling. Mm-hmm. Because people only really give him the credit for the behind-the-scenes stuff, not necessarily the performing, which he did in the WWE. Well, and TNA, I guess. But yeah, there's a few people on this actually that I could listen to a lot. And like, I love listening to Bischoff. I love listening to Kevin Nash. I also love listening to Kevin Sullivan. It feels like we always crap on him now, but like The Rock, he didn't really add too much to this episode, huh?
No, I mean, what besides like producing it, what really is his qualifications?
But he's a talking head,
to give right. Yeah, this is the thing. He's just there for the star power, I think.
Well, you say what his qualifications. He was one of the biggest stars on the oppositions to WCW and helped the WWF beat WCW.
Not for the timeline that this episode started, what, like 89 and ended at 97? When did The Rock come around? Like 97, 96?
He debuted in 96, but yeah, he became big in that. Yeah, but I'm saying he's pretty... He could say a lot of stuff, you know. Like, there's a lot of stuff, but he kind of, keeps it down the middle as per normal. But he must have I do wonder why. Like, did someone come to The Rock with this idea? Like, I wonder what made The Rock interested in doing this, because I also know they produced another series with Vice and maybe the Dark Side of the Ring guys. They did like a Territories series as well.
Oh, cool! I'm surprised you haven't watched that.
I have.
Oh, fair enough.
I think it's called like Back to the Territories or something. And basically they had like 6 episodes. Each episode was like concentrating on a different territory. I just don't think it was very popular actually, but The Rock was involved in that. I think The Rock is actually, despite what people think, I think he's a massive wrestling fan. I really do. Yeah. And obviously he was born into it and everything else, but I think he still loves pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we had all sorts of talking heads on here. We had, I'll tell you another person I can't help but really like, and he gets a lot of criticism, but I really like and enjoy Vince Russo.
Yeah,
I just enjoy him.
He's never boring.
No, exactly.
Right.
And the time that I've ever spent with Russo, always thought he was like really cool, super nice guy. Really cool. And I know people like, I give him a lot of flack, but some of it may be warranted, but I don't know. I feel like he probably produced more good than bad. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I did really enjoy the selection of talking heads that they got for this, apart from maybe The Rock, but we'll get there. I'm sure he'll have more to do in the next episodes. But yeah, Conan was another one on there.
So our boy Conan, I thought, did really well. Who do you think Goldberg and Bret Hart were kind of in competition to be who could be the most bitter?
I was going to say that to you later on. You just stole my bit.
Well, we just bring it now.
Yeah, it's hard because like before I answer that, or before we talk into that, would you quickly say that Eric Bischoff came across as good or bad in this episode? I think good.
No, great. I thought.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like it wouldn't really be Vice if they didn't have, like you said, like any sort of drama. So that's where Goldberg particularly Bret like comes in, I think. Like, he always did that foil.
So, I mean, with pretty much like chronological, they start Nitro, it's kind of 50-50 for quite a while. Then we all know the story. They managed to convince Hogan to turn heel, starts the NWO. It's all a big deal and everyone loves it. And now the WCW is defeating WWE, but now it's getting too big too quick. There's too many, chefs in the kitchen or cooks in the kitchen. And the first crack happens with Starrcade 1997, where they build Sting up. They build this feud between Sting and Hogan for 18 months. And then they fluff the finish with the referee supposed to do a fast count, which he doesn't. And then Bret Hart comes out and says, he did a fast count. I'm not going to stand for this. Restart the match. And it doesn't really make any sense. But yeah, this whole ordeal that we've all seen and heard like 100 times. The talking heads. So yeah, well, just the concept of the show as a whole. I find it interesting that they called the show, and obviously it's supposed to kind of get a reaction out of people, but Who Killed WCW? And I don't think it's really fair. Like, I don't necessarily think one person killed WCW. And honestly, we can watch all 4 episodes, but like, spoiler alert, Nash got it right, and maybe Bischoff. Like, it was Turner Broadcast. Right. Simple as that. Do you know what I mean? Like a bad booking decision from, or a handful of bad booking from WCW, like didn't kill the company. You know, like, yeah, it wasn't good when David Arquette won WCW World Title, but I'm pretty sure like the last year of Nitro, it was still doing like nowhere near as good ratings, but still like not bad ratings. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure far more than maybe even Raw, or let's say it's equal to Raw now. I might be way off here, or probably more than AEW. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's funny because Goldberg, he blamed Eric Bischoff.
Yeah.
Or did he blame Vince Russo? Someone blamed Vince Russo. Who was that?
Maybe that was Goldberg. And Brett blamed Goldberg? Eric, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I should have wrote that down. So Goldberg blamed Vince Russo. He probably doesn't like Russo because he turned Goldberg heel, and that was a disaster. Brett blamed Eric Bischoff. Here's the thing, right? So realistically, I feel like WCW or Bischoff, he had like 3 really good ideas, right? NWO, Crow Sting, and then later Goldberg, right? And it's funny because, and then it all went to crap in 97, 98. But back in the territory days, they used to refresh the bookers like once every, maybe it was every 6 months, but like they used to say like bookers get burnt out after 18 months, after a year and a half, right? So that kind of makes sense, right? Like Bischoff kind of 96, and then by halfway through 97, everything's kind of, or 98, whatever you want to say. So it kind of makes sense. He had those 3 great ideas, but then after that, he's just too fatigued, and it's like there's only so much you can give, right? And of course, I think in 99 he ended up leaving and blah blah blah. So it kind of makes sense, and I think that's, you know, Bischoff. I think clearly, I think it must make him upset when they tried to blame Bischoff for the person that killed WCW. He was one of the people trying to buy the company at the end. Do you know what I mean? He didn't want it to die. He wanted to keep it going. Like, well, if we're going to really answer it, who killed WCW? Vince McMahon. He brought it and just said, nope, let's get rid of it, right?
Invasion.
So if you're going to blame it on one person, then it's going to be Vince McMahon. But realistically, it's just down to Turner Broadcast. And they did the merger with AOL, so then it was out of their control in terms of, you know, before they always had Ted Turner getting the last word, and he's like, I want to keep it. Everyone else in the company didn't want that dumbass wrestling, which I guess was a lot of times was losing money, whatever else. When it came with the merger, it's like, okay, we're getting rid of WCW now. So, I mean, you could argue, which the show is here for, I guess, that maybe Turner Broadcasting that and AOL wouldn't want to get rid of the company if it was making money. And the reason why maybe it was losing loads of money was because it was mismanaged or bad booking, everything else, I guess. But I don't think you can really pinpoint like who killed WCW. And I think a lot of people's suggestions, other than like the Turner Network, are a little unfair. They're more kind of, there's like vengefulness behind them. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, like pettiness. Yeah.
Yeah. Clearly just like Brett doesn't like Bischoff, you know, and clearly Goldberg doesn't like Russo.
Right. I've got a question for you about that. One part I didn't really understand. So I think it was Brett, at least, was saying how Bischoff was just Hulk Hogan's puppet. Isn't that the point of the character? Like, wasn't that Eric Bischoff's character? Isn't he conflating the character with the man? Or was, because of Hulk Hogan's creative control, is that what Brett's trying to say is also behind the scenes, he was literally his puppet? Because that's part, I didn't know what was real and what wasn't.
I think Brett was essentially saying that Bischoff was up Hogan's ass and was his puppet. Like, he was kind of like that on TV, but that was kind of art imitating real life. I guess he was kind of like that in real life. But again, Hogan was the biggest star in the company. And it's like, I don't know how to explain this. So like in Japan, back in sort of the 90s or even 70s and 80s, the companies were kind of like, it was the big star, you know? It was like Inoki or Bubba. It was all based on them. And they were so popular, they started their own promotions. Do you know what I mean? Based off them. Or like later, like Masawa with Noah. Or let's say like boxing with like Floyd Money Mayweather, right? Hogan was almost like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like that. Like, well, you want to promote the Hulk Hogan fights. Like, it's a deal between WCW and him. Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know. Is what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Like, Hogan wasn't just one of the boys, was he? Like,
oh, no. And he's almost a figurehead.
Right.
Yeah. No,
exactly.
I get that.
So, like,
and you reckon the rest of the talent, like, didn't really, like, was that jealousy or?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's funny, though, because I know back in the 80s, all the talent, they loved being on shows of Hogan because they were all paid on the house. And if they're on the show with Hogan, they're making more money. Do you know what I mean? If you were on top with Hogan, you're making a damn fortune. So everyone wanted to be on the shows. There was A loops, B loops, and C loops, or A shows, B shows, C shows. Mm-hmm. And obviously Hogan's on the A shows, and you always wanted to be on them because you made more money. WCW comes around mid-90s, we start getting all these guaranteed contracts. Now Hogan's taking my TV time. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of jealousy. And I think you could argue, okay, maybe Hogan should have put more people over and everything else. It's like, but at the same time, he had to protect his spot. If he just put everyone over, it wouldn't mean anything when he did. And if you actually look at it, he did, in the end, actually end up putting over a lot more people than fans would give him credit for. He put more people over, I feel like, than Shawn Michaels did in his prime. You know, top stars don't really lose a lot. Like Austin didn't really lose a lot. That's part of the whole package. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, Hogan put over, you know, Sting here. I know it's weird. Luger, a bunch of people. Well, I did think it's funny, this whole story about Starrcade 97, the idea that they don't really say that in the show, but they've said it in other shows or in books and stuff, that Hogan and Bischoff weren't happy because Sting turned up not really in shape and he didn't have a tan was one of the things. Now, I understand them not being happy that Sting wasn't in shape or it didn't have a tan. I get that, okay? But what I don't understand is, it's like, okay, so because of that, you're still going to put him over, but you're just not going to do it very well.
Self-sabotage, right?
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, we'll show him, it's like, well, you just done 18 months of build. Surely you want this to be good and this payoff to be good. It's like, because he turned up out of shape, we're going to like make it not
run
good.
it into the ground. It just seems self-destructive, like not really good for business.
Like you'd rather them just be like, hey, he turned up without a tan, he wasn't in shape, we're changing line, like Hogan's going over. Okay. Do you know what I mean? I'd almost be like, that would be better than what they did. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're still going to do it, but just do it rubbish. But no, towards the end of the show, they start talking about how the WWF got forced into doing new things, like becoming more raunchy and going into the Attitude Era. And I thought, again, Conan was very funny on this, how he said that him and Disco Inferno used to watch Monday Night Raw when they were backstage at Nitro. And people would be like, what are you doing? And they said, oh, we were so over it, we didn't care. We said, oh, this show is more cool than ours, which I thought was pretty hilarious.
I like that.
It was funny. I will say this, okay? There's been so much documentaries, books, podcasts, all this stuff covered WCW. I know this is only one episode, but maybe you might have enjoyed this a lot more than me, just because, I mean, I might be wrong. I don't even know if you enjoyed it yet. But there was nothing in this show that I'd never seen or heard before. Honestly, there wasn't really anything in this show that I had heard 100 times.
Right.
Bischoff tried to claim that he didn't know what WCW was until he signed there, which I don't believe. I think that's maybe bad memory or just, making the story more, I don't know. But everything in this, it kind of felt like, we've heard this all many a times. There wasn't any really new takes, and I'm hoping that as they go deeper into the series, that maybe they will, because if they don't, to me, it may kind of feel like I wasted my time watching. I mean, it's wrestling. I still enjoy it, whatever. I can watch an old documentary and still enjoy it. But I feel like if they're going to go into all this effort to make like a 4 episodes in this series and do this promotion, at least have something kind of new and a different side of the story to tell us, don't you think?
In some ways, yes, because you've got to give something for actual hardcore wrestling fans as well as like the mainstream like watcher, whatever you want to call it, which is where I'm going to get to, where I'm going to defend this show now. Is I'm sure some guy, like I'm sure people who are into 90s Euro pop as much as you're into wrestling would say the same thing about that Eiffel 65 thing that you watch. Oh, it didn't tell me anything new. You know everything about wrestling, but you really enjoyed that Eiffel 65 one. Ultimately, this documentary, this show is just telling stories, right? That people may not have heard before. I know we have. Well, you have. Some stuff was new.
Is there really anyone watching it that won't have, like, is there actually any casual people? I feel like just wrestling fans are going to watch this. I mean,
do you really think that?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think that people watch anything Vice puts out. Not millions of people. I'm just saying, like, there are people. And
I think the ratings for these shows, like I was talking back to the territories and the Dark Side of the Ring would suggest otherwise. I think they're just watched by wrestling fans. Yeah.
Oh.
Like, well, at least the complete majority, I'd say. Okay. I might be way off here, but that would be my understanding that these are watched. Like, I'd love if wrestling was watched by casual people.
Right.
It's just not really.
I think this show would be great for a casual viewer who's not into wrestling but likes stories.
I think I just can't.
I think it would be good for them, but you just don't think that was the right. Like, they're not going to watch it, so why do it for them?
I don't imagine putting this on the TV and my mum being like enjoying it because she's just not a wrestling fan. You just don't care. Yeah. Well, what's wrong with my mum?
Oh, nothing. She's an angel.
Well, let's not start about your mother.
Or what?
Or shall we?
We can do, yeah. Bonus episode all about our mums.
Would Sam Scott's mum enjoy this episode?
No, Sam Scott's mum wouldn't enjoy this episode. But I feel like some like younger people who aren't that into wrestling, but who might be drawn into like, you know, the dark side of the ring and who killed. They always go for these negative things. Obviously, like the WWE documentaries are like the complete opposite. They're always really celebratory. But people are there's going to be one or two people who are just going to be interested in that alone, listen to it, watch it, and come away with something. I think those people would get something good out of this. No. Me? I'm in between, aren't I?
It sounds like it. Here's a great question. Why do you think ECW is just like so celebrated? Whereas, so if they did a documentary about ECW, it wouldn't be Who Killed ECW. It would be like ECW revolutionized pro wrestling.
Yeah, despite all of this, it's
But then when we talk about WCW, it's always very negative. It's always who killed WCW, and WCW went out of business, and there was all these disasters and all these bad decisions. But it's like they also did a lot of good. You know what I mean? I'd say definitely more, way more good than bad. Do you know what I mean? Like without WCW, who knows what the wrestling scene would have been like? And yes, it would have been great if it could have stayed around. It would have been amazing. And it's such a shame that it didn't. But yeah, it is kind of interesting how the narratives, right?
Yeah, the narrative is like WCW is seen as a joke, or was a joke, and it wasn't. Like, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some stuff that you can totally ridicule, but overall, yeah, no, it was great. It was a great product, if you ask me. I don't know why it gets hated on. Is it because it's the Pepsi of of wrestling at the time?
I think it's a good question. Like, people don't crap on ECW because they knew what it was, and it was the underdog.
And it's an underdog. Yes, totally. Yeah.
Whereas WCW, people
still had the Turner money, and yeah, it's not an underdog.
And yeah, it's not an underdog. So maybe that's why. And also, everyone thinks they can book shows better. They don't really understand when you're running a show and you're dealing with talents, you're dealing with egos, you're dealing with TV networks. I mean, they speak about it a little bit in this show when they tell us what's coming next week.
Yeah.
And it's like the network started limiting the show, what they could do, and Standard and Practices started limiting the show. You see a little clip of Scott Hall, which I don't think I've seen before, where he's like, can I say butt on here? Which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, everyone thinks they can do a better job. But it's like, there's so much that goes into this. You really don't understand. You know what I mean? And I think overall, like I said, WCW just had some great stuff, and it completely changed. It 100% changed what wrestling on TV is or was, like, completely. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no Monday Night Raw without Nitro, without Eric Bischoff. I wanted to take a minute to talk about our newest sponsor, MadCatBeardCare.com. Myself, I have a beard. Sam, you have a beard. Beards are very popular now, but you've got to take care of your beard. You got to get yourself over to MadCatBeardCare.com. I'm looking at the oils and the balms on there. First of all, they're all designed by different pro wrestlers and marketed as different pro wrestlers. So there's a bunch of guys involved with this, like Matt Cardona, Brian Myers, Delirious, Jay Lethal, a whole collection of awesome wrestlers that have their own product on madcatbeardcare.com. Not only that, but a portion of the profits go to cat rescues around the country. So I think that's already exciting. But the beard oils and the balms both are made from organic argan oil, jojoba, and vitamin E, which when combined helps to soften, strengthen, and vitalize and stimulate circulation in the face, nourishing and strengthening the hair follicles to assist growth. Now, this is what you need. If you've got a patchy beard, you need to get yourself to madcatbeardcare.com. The balms also include the same oil and mixture as the oils, but he adds the shea butter, which helps alleviate itch and irritation to your face, while also helping control pesky stray hairs by allowing you to style them into place. He uses local organic beeswax that helps to get more of a hold to your style. So you got to look after your skin underneath your beard just like you do your scalp. Like, these aren't things that you can neglect. And that's why we've teamed up with madcatbeardcare.com. And right now, just for listening to the show, you can get yourself a whopping 15% off products at madcatbeardcare.com by using the code VILLAIN. That's 15% for the promo code VILLAIN. That's VILLAIN. Pick yourself up the Villain's Curse, my own beard oil, my own beard balm. That's exactly what I use every day on my face to make my famous beard look beautiful. You can do the same thing too. So last time I'm going to say it, get yourself over now to madcatbeardcare.com. Promo VILLAIN. I actually, tell a lie, I did learn something new from this show. I didn't realize that it was called Nitro after they tell us in this that it was named after, I guess they had like an afternoon of action TV programming, which was called like Saturday Nitro or something. Do you remember that on the show?
Yeah. And so they
so you could be Monday Night Nitro.
Right. Yeah. Like you're the flagship version of Nitro for the Monday. Yeah.
Yeah. I never knew that.
No, I never knew that. I always wondered why it was called that.
Yeah. Is it Monday Night Nitro or Monday Nitro?
Monday Nitro, right?
Not Monday Night Nitro. I think I was thinking it was Monday Night Nitro because Jericho used to have the Monday Night Jericho or whatever.
Jericho, yeah.
Oh.
And it was obviously Monday Night Raw as well, obviously.
Monday Night Raw, yeah. But I guess you don't need the night if there's Nitro.
In the thing.
But it's two different things, is it not?
It is. It is. Do you know what's really funny? What made me think, like what I was thinking about when we were watching this, well, we watched it separately. When I was watching this is so much stuff that they said in this, you've said to me almost verbatim, like off the podcast, during the Nitro pilot we did, it was almost like your words were coming out of them. Really? And I just found that very interesting. Yeah, because I keep saying you should do a friggin' wrestling documentary, dude.
People often say that to me. They should do a documentary about me. Maybe one day.
Not about you. I reckon you should be The Rock. You should produce a wrestling documentary. Yeah,
I would quite like to produce a British wrestling
wrestling
one. Unfortunately, a lot of the old British wrestlers aren't really with us anymore.
Around
so it's kind of
anymore.
like
Yeah.
it's a race against time to kind of get that stuff. And just trying to get like footage and stuff, I feel like it's probably near impossible. But that's the issue with documentaries. I feel like I could make a documentary, but I wouldn't be able to show it anywhere or even have it on YouTube because of the footage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to get an actual documentary, you're gonna need thousands of thousands to get licensed footage, right? So maybe I'll just write a blog or something, or talk about it
or
on
a
a podcast.
book. Yes, exactly. There we go.
So overall, Sam, you enjoyed the episode? Oh, what about every 5 minutes doing the kind of the back ends of the commercial? Like, produced by $7, blah blah blah. That was a bit much, huh?
Yeah, every 3 minutes there was almost like a commercial break, and it was a very ADHD style of presentation. And I have ADHD, and it still annoyed me. It was. I don't think it needed that. I think it could have done with less bombastic editing or segmenting. It was a little bit frustrating. We watched it on YouTube. Maybe it's different on Vice or whatever. I don't know.
It's the same on Vice. I'm pretty sure.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying.
Apart from that, honestly, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I did. I didn't think I would actually.
No, I enjoyed it. I did, but like I said, it didn't really tell us anything that I didn't know already. But again, just kind of like an easy watch. I think it was like 42, 43 minutes. If they cut out all those bloody commercials.
Of those bits, yeah.
It could probably be like 30 minutes, I'd say. And just, easy watch.
I would recommend it to casuals. It doesn't sound like you. Would you?
If you're bored and want something to watch, you're not going to be offended. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. Like, I'm not losing hope just yet. I'm hoping we're going to get a bit more, because it's kind of like the first episode. It seems like they're just trying to lay the grounds for everything.
They're setting everything up. Yeah, totally.
You know, like when you go see a therapist, you got to go see them like 2 or 3 times and tell them everything until they start giving you advice, right? Maybe you understand, right?
Yeah. I go to my. I need
you got
a
to tell them
therapist after doing this episode with you.
You got to spend like weeks and weeks and weeks to tell them about your trauma. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
just
maybe
for them
months,
to be able to say it back to
years.
you. Yeah. Right.
And give them lots of money.
Lots of money. And they did that, but condensed it all into one episode.
Yeah. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that the next
3 episodes will be the therapist actually doing their job.
Well, just so little, like WWE's done so many WCW documentaries. Like, make these somewhat different. Make them a little bit different, you know?
You think this was safe, do you?
Too safe. I would have liked maybe to had some more interesting or obscure talking heads from people. To be fair, I mean, they had a lady that I'd never seen before who was some kind of executive at Turner.
Wasn't that Eric Bischoff's ex-wife or a different lady?
I don't think it was his ex-wife. Did I miss that bit?
Or wife or ex-wife.
Oh, possibly.
I can't remember.
I'm not sure about that.
The brunette.
I think so.
I think that was Eric Bischoff's wife. Maybe I've completely made that up and that's headcanon.
They had a guy called Guy Evans, who's an author, spoke on there.
Yeah.
Again, he was mainly there just to kind of tell the story.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they could have had some more, I don't know, maybe like a Jericho. I guess he's spoken about it before, but I don't know. Maybe, again, as the episode goes along or the series goes along, maybe we'll see a little bit more. I wonder, or do you think this is it? These are all the guys now? Where's Disco Inferno? I'd like to see Disco Inferno.
Yeah, I'd like to see Disco Inferno. I have a feeling that if they're going to say who killed WCW, and they're all going to dump on Hogan, because there's obviously no way Hogan will do this. But it'd be great if Hogan came in on the last episode. That'd be pretty rad.
I feel like they was missing Hogan big time.
I feel that way. So either they're keeping him hidden until the end, or they'll just dump on him because he doesn't want involvement.
Sure.
One of those two things I'm predicting.
Probably the latter. Okay.
Yeah.
A few questions. There's no point in us really like rating this or favorite match or anything, but your favorite talking head?
Oh, Conan was the funniest, I think. But I was surprised. Like, it was nice to see Kevin Sullivan, honestly. I actually didn't know he's still alive.
Say. Yeah.
Honestly.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I didn't know. And so it was great. And he was very interesting.
I put a reel up on my Instagram and I took a quote from Kevin Sullivan from this show. And someone commented on it saying, "Ugh, using Trump quotes isn't the way to go." And I replied, "It's Kevin Sullivan." And then everyone else was like dunking on this guy. It's so funny. But I love Kevin Sullivan, and honestly, I can fall asleep listening to Kevin Sullivan shoot interviews. So he's one of my favorites. And yeah, Conan is always just a great talker. I don't know if you've ever seen Conan's Hall of Fame speech for Rey Mysterio. You should, if you're bored, go out your way and watch it because it's like the best Hall of Fame speech ever. He's just such a good talker. So yeah, it's good to have him on the show. Okay, well, next week we're going to try and review episode 2. We might have to both get advice, but we're going to try and do it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a follow on the social media at The Villain Pod. We're on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you really enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star review and we'll read it out on the show and give you a shout out. You know, win-win for us all.
But anyway, that's everything from us. So have a good week. Till next week.